Good evening. We call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Welcome everyone to the Holyoke School Committee for December 16th. Ms. LaFawn, roll call, please.
Present.
Present.
Present. Here.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Present.
Here. Before we stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance real quickly, I hereby inform all attendees that a video and audio recording is being made of the meeting, and the meeting is being shown live on the city's community TV channel. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
One nation, God, indivisible.
Anyone sign up for public discussion? Good. Before we start our student showcase this evening, I first want to take this opportunity to recognize two outstanding school committee members who tonight is their last time joining us here, and that is Mr. Dennis Burks for Ward 3 and Mr. John Brunel for Ward 5. I have something to say that I'm going to pull up here real quickly. Little bit about Mr. Burks. He served as the Ward 3 school committee member since March of 2008, where he was appointed to fill a vacancy on the committee. He is currently the second longest serving member on the school committee, and he is a Massachusetts Association of School Committees All-State Committee honoree. He has served on just about every subcommittee over the years, including Chair of Finance, Rules and Policies, and Curriculum and Instruction, Leadership, Accountability and Measurement, Educator Negotiations, Superintendent Evaluations, Communications and Policies. He's also served in multiple district advisory committees, including the most recent Middle School Redesign Committee, the City's School Building Advisory Committee, the district's Parent Advisory Committee, and the district's Equity Coalition, and much more. He's also been a public school teacher in the region for over 20 years. For myself, he has been a mentor to me, especially with special education, and I have been honored to serve with him since I was elected in 2013. Thank you, Mr. Burks.
Thank you.
Mr. Brunel. He was elected to serve on the school committee. Along with myself, it was quite a number of us who were new back in fall of 2013 and began serving his term in January of 14. He was elected to the city council in 2000 and served 5 terms. He's a lifelong Holyoke resident who was educated in the Holyoke Public Schools. He's a business owner and father of 3 Holyoke High School graduates. He served on the Resources and Capacity Building Subcommittee, the Joint City Council School Committee Subcommittee, which he also chaired. He's also served on a variety of advisory committees and established Holyoke's Athletic Hall of Fame, which inducts and celebrates former Holyoke athletes each year. John, as well, it's been an honor serving alongside of you, and you're going to be deeply missed. And I thank you both for your time and service. We do want to present the both of you with an award, and we also want to hear from the both of you. So if you can both come up.
The backup.
Sorry about that. Did everybody hear that, by the way? John Brunel, in grateful appreciation for your dedicated service and leadership as the Ward 5 representative on the Holyoke School Committee.
And I have one for Mr. Burks, presented to Dennis Burks in grateful appreciation for your dedicated service and leadership as the Ward 3 representative on the Holyoke School Committee from 2008 to 2019. Thank you, Dennis, for your work and service to the city of Holyoke.
So who's going first? Mr. Brunel.
Sure, I'll go first. I just want to thank the residents of Ward 5, my constituents, for electing me 6 years ago to serve. It's been an honor to serve them and to serve with the different school committee members and with Dr. Zreich, who I think has put this school system on the right path to a great future. I don't know if I should thank Devin or blame Devin. Years ago, 6 years ago or so, Devin left to become, he was the Ward 5 City Council, school committee person, and we were talking about who we were going to try and get to run for the seat because there was individuals that were running for it that we weren't too happy with. And we tried to get other folks, and I had retired from the city council, but I ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to do it because I have daughters in the school system, and I thought it was very important that that they had somebody that was a parent of a child in the system to be an advocate for them and for the remainder of the students, for the students that we serve. And I tell you, the group of school committee people that are here are tremendous advocates for the students, and they understand. And I'm going to steal a line from Ronnie Callamore that used to say all the time was, is it good for the children? So that's where when you're voting, and when we voted, Ronnie always said, is it good for the children? If it's good for the children, then you support it and do what you can. So the school committee is losing a great advocate in Mr. Burks, but replacing with probably a bigger advocate in his wife. And watch out. No, but so I know with the leadership that from Mildred and everybody on this committee, that they'll remember to vote and think of, is it good for the children? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, very much. It's been an interesting 10 years on the committee. There's been many things that have happened over these 10 years, but it's been good. So I want to thank you all for being wonderful co-committee people. You've all been great in advocating for the children here in Holyoke. I also want to thank those who were on the committee before, like Mary Signet, Peggy Boulay, Yvonne Garcia, and Barry Conway also, who were on the committee when I was here. I left to do something else. I know that in the city, there was a disconnect in the seat that I was running for, and understanding that what happens in the city affects what happens in the schools and vice versa also. Public safety and building a bigger tax base was one of those, and I felt that I would try to do something else. A quote that I use a lot of times, especially speaking to students, is there is no one way. Um, the way is any way that works, and the more ways you have, the more successful you'll be. So this was one way that I was able to serve the committee and serve Holyoke, and I want to try another way. It didn't work out, but there will definitely be more ways. And I want to talk about the teachers also. Thank for the teachers and all of the staff, custodians, paraprofessionals, secretaries, cafeteria workers for everything that they do. Um, they do a lot for the students here, and I want to thank the students as well. Um, and I hope that I've been able to show you also that if there's an opportunity, you go for it. If you don't get it, that's fine. You learn from it, and then you try another one. You keep going. And that's just the way that it is. That's how life is. That's how it works. But you don't stop. Just keep moving. You stand for what's right. You fight for what's right. Students have gone through a lot, and I'm very proud of them. The graduation rate has went up through supports. Dr. Zreich and your team, they've created opportunities for students, and a lot of those students are taking advantage of those opportunities, and it's great to see, especially in the graduation rate going up and things like that. And I've met students who are working at different places, also in dual enrollment, and they're working very hard to be successful. So I'm proud of everything that you've done. I'm proud to have been able to serve on this committee, and I thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have anything that they want to add? Okay. I also have one other person that I wanted to acknowledge, and that would be the guy over here to the left of me, Mr. Devin Sheehan. I want to thank him for his mentorship and leadership. Devin is winding down his year as president of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, but he will continue to serve as the Northeast Regional Director for the National School Boards Association. We, as members of the Holyoke School Committee, are honored to have Devin representing not only the issues our children and families face in the city of Holyoke, but the issues faced by children in the public schools across the nation. Devin advocates fiercely for the rights of all children, especially for the children who are traditionally underrepresented and who go largely unseen in policy and governance at all levels. We want to thank you, Devin, and for me, you've always been a mentor, always telling me, you can do it, and I thank you.
Thank you, and it has been an honor to be able to serve the State School Committee Association from Holyoke. I'm the first person from Holyoke to fill that role. But it really, I appreciate that, but as I always tell people, it's being the president of the association is definitely not about me. But what I can say is that when I first got involved in the leadership of the Mass Association of School Committees, we embarked on the hard-fought journey to increase educational funding here in the Commonwealth. And it was a icy day up in Northampton where people had to give public testimony about the issues with public education. We heard from people from Holyoke and Chicopee and small places like Pelham and Leverett, and the message was the same. We have different issues, but it was the problems with underfunding, the problems with poverty, both in rural areas and urban areas, and the challenges that we all face. And I'm proud that as president, I got to see just 2 weeks ago now the signing of the Student Opportunity Act, which is going to provide for all of our districts, but provide so much for the city of Holyoke and all of our students with an urban education. And I think it was the right step forward by our legislature and the governor to really increase school funding. But I also have to say, one of the people don't know this, and he doesn't say it enough, but one of the leading forces of why we have such a comprehensive school funding bill and why this all happened is our state representative, Aaron Vega. And it is not nearly recognized by anyone enough, but for those of you who don't know, Aaron, Representative Mary Keefe from Worcester, and Senator Sonia Chang Diaz from the Boston area were the ones that filed the legislation back in March or so, I think, is when they officially filed it. And it really, people need to step up. They need to thank Aaron when they see him, because if it weren't for him, I don't think that we would be in this spot that we are today with the extra money that Holyoke's getting and the extra money that almost every community here in the Commonwealth will receive for their public school students. I also have to give a huge heartfelt thanks to John. He's right. I did call him up and say, when we were talking about people running for school committee, and so why don't you do it? Let's stop talking about people. Why don't you do that? And John's time on the city council, I know I could always call on him, even just as a constituent, since I was a resident of the ward at the time, to be there when needed. So I appreciate that. And Dennis, I don't know. It's gonna be big shoes to fill by the next person coming in, because you definitely set a tone on this committee, and I know that I'm a better person because I got to serve along you within the school committee, and it's gonna it's hard to say because it's your wife coming on, but it's a tough void you are going to be a tough spot to fill for anyone that would be taking that seat. And school committees and all public boards are made up of individuals who come together and bring different ideas. And I just always look, and I think that even the amount of changes that have occurred on this committee over the past 10 years that I've been here, I mean, I'm really sorry to see you leave. And I know that you're not going forever with your service to the city. And I really look forward to what the next step is, but I really appreciate everything you've done with this. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just want to say something brief about these two gentlemen here. They have absolutely both the worst taste in football teams. They both root for loser football teams in the Jets and the Raiders. But that's the one similarity they have. Other than that, their approach to the work on this committee is very different, but just as impactful. John was the first person that greeted me when I arrived with the Holyoke shirt, and he hasn't stopped talking to me since that moment. And he was never afraid he's never been afraid to tell me what he thought and the truth. Sometimes it hurt, but he was always in my ear, and he's been a very strong confidant and ally over the last few years. And I appreciate his knowledge of how the city works, and he really I got a lot of tutelage from John over the last, hard to believe, 4.5 years. Dennis Burke's very different style. Doesn't say as much, but when he speaks, man, oh man, is it powerful. And it's the truth. And it's really unique and special to have an educator on a school committee. Somebody who does the work that our teachers do every day and understands the complexities and the challenges and how hard the work is. And he always brought that perspective, and I'm grateful to have had the chance to work with both of them. Hopefully they'll find time to change their allegiances of football teams, and they'll come to their senses. But other than that, it is a big loss and a big void for the Holyoke Public Schools that these two gentlemen stepped down.
Thank you, Doctor. I just know neither one of our teams got caught spying on another team. So. I'll leave it at that.
Derek, go ahead.
I just want to also I know that John's family is here. They came out, and Dennis's family came out. Thank you all for allowing John and Dennis to join us for all these years, because it really is the families who give up so much to allow someone in their family to do this. So thank all of you, and for being part of our family too.
And so we have here the student showcase from Veritas Prep Holyoke. Up next.
Yes, so we have Mr. Rue Rattray, and he's got a whole host of people with him who have joined him. In your folder, you have some math work that I know they're going to want to reference. They're going to put you to work here tonight. There's a packet of student work that I would ask you to take out right now for this presentation.
Thank you for giving us a couple of minutes to be able to come and talk with you about math. Before, we want a lot of this to be about our students, but I do want to recognize we're very fortunate at our school. We have some of the best teachers in the world, some of the most dedicated teachers in the world. I have heard rumor indicates that there might be a snow day tomorrow. Given that, if you're a staff member at our school, could you raise your hand, please? So they're all out here to support our two students, and we wanted to talk about math tonight because we love math. Our goal is that when our students graduate, all of our students will be on grade level for reading and on grade level for math. And when many of our students came to us, that's not where we started, and we're working on it right now. We just took our first ANET assessment on math last week. 44% of our sixth graders are at the benchmark, the network average, which is a pretty good proxy for being on grade level. So we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to do this, and we have to be able to do this. This is a commitment that we've made to students and to families, that our students will leave our school after 4 years on grade level. So a lot of the design of the math work is done by Ms. Sarah Gray, who's right here, and she is going to come up with two of our strongest math students and one of our strongest math teachers to talk more about math.
Hi, so my name is Sarah Gray. I am the Dean of Curriculum and Instruction, focusing on science and math at Holyoke, at Veritas Prep Holyoke. And I want to let the students talk about their fantastic work that's in front of you in just a moment, but wanted to just say how we do math at Veritas, and say sort of our approach to math overall is like a problem solving model. And so we really try to challenge students to do the heavy lifting and the critical thinking. And Miss Andrea Magana is here to talk just a little bit. She's been huge in the curriculum development for our sixth grade curriculum this year. And so she's just going to talk about what a typical lesson looks like that she puts together.
Good evening. So in putting in lessons, I take into consideration not just our kids, but like our demographic of students on IEPs and our L population, to make sure that it's accessible for all students, but also at the same time challenging them, because we never want the students just to be complicit in doing math work, but be able to conceptually think through problems and go in deeper than just procedurally being able to follow steps on the board, but instead be able to discuss not only with themselves but with the teacher of what this problem is telling them and why they're doing what they're doing, not just because the teacher told me to, but because this is the best way to solve our problems. So we do that in different steps. We always have our do now, which gets us started in our class, but then our level up task, where I try to get them in depth of the concept, and then our guided practice is what it is. It's our discussion where we discuss and be able to conversate with each other and talk about what that lesson is. And as you can tell, their habits having grown immensely from the start of fifth grade by the work that you see in front of them, which is some of the work that these ladies produced on their ANET, which is great to just be able to see that they now are able to put into words what they are able to explicitly say in class. So I'm really proud of them.
And Cinelis is, I think, the first set of work you have, and I just want to name that this is 2 out of 4 sheets of her work that she did on this assessment. And I asked Cinelis to talk a little bit about what math learning is like at Veritas.
Math at Veritas is good because if you don't understand something, the teachers obviously gives you more time to understand the problem instead of you moving on to something else. And then once you get it, they let you move on to something else.
And then I asked Paola, she's the second set of work in there, to just talk a little bit about her work specifically and what she thinks about as she does, as she takes tests and as she does her work.
I feel like it's easy, kind of, because we always do our do now to and then I did practice and the level up tasks to learn what we're gonna do in the independent practice, which is learn a little bit more about the lesson. And in the exit ticket, we're gonna get graded at it about what we have learned on it.
Anybody, Mr. Christian, you look like you have a question, and they
I
can't give
do.
you the answer
I,
to any
I
of
do,
this.
I do. So I was so good at math, I became a lawyer, and I don't do any math ever. But so I had visited Veritas in Springfield maybe a year or something ago. It's a while ago now. Yeah, we went to that. And one of the things that I saw at Veritas that I really liked a lot was the classrooms all had the teachers' colleges like all over the place. Is that something that you have in your classrooms now? And what tell me about that if one of the students maybe
Our class is NYU, which is and our teacher is Miss Ted and Miss Macaña. Went to UMass. Yeah, how the libraries and stuff, and how they did the went all around the yeah.
yeah. Okay, great. And you do field trips and things. Sounds like you. Is this sixth grade? Did we did a field trip? Is that fifth grade? And you think about going to college already? That's for you guys. Yeah. Like not a question. Definitely. That's good. All right.
Mr. Brunel?
Thanks. I went with Niles and Dr. Zreik on that tour, and it was very good too. And I met you there as well. And it was good though, as well as we got to meet some of the parents as well as some of the students. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I just want to maybe ask the students how they feel, is that the students that were there, I don't want to say they were stressed, but they were I would say excited for their work, but I mean they had a lot of work to do, but they actually enjoyed the work, I would say, and that they a lot more so than the previous school that they were at. Somebody is their first time coming in to the school, others were there for a couple of years. Um, and I just wondering, how do you feel about the students? How do you feel about the work that you're given there? Busy? I mean, how do you feel about the work?
I think that the work at Veritas is very good because the teachers obviously make it funner than usual. Better because in the other school that we were before, they didn't like just like that better as we are in Veritas. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that the students took responsibilities for the work that they had to do, and they felt more. I mean, it was very impressive, and they were eager to do well in the school compared to where they had gone previous. It sounds like you're kind of feeling that same. I don't want to say that, but it feels like the same way. You're feeling more challenged. Good.
I have a quick I got a quick follow-up.
Oh, Mr. Christian?
Yeah, just so when we were at Veritas, the other thing that I noticed was there were a lot of student teachers in the classrooms, and that seemed to help a lot. It seemed like when the classes that we observed, if a student was having an issue, there was a student teacher that would pop up, start working with that student in the back of the class as the lesson continued. Is that something that you're able to do in the Holyoke system?
Awesome. Yep. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
And you guys gave me a lot of work to go through. It'll be a weekend thing.
I do want to just thank all the teachers and staff from Veritas that came tonight, too. We
Absolutely.
appreciate you being here to support students, your students.
Thank you.
Yep.
Did they know that?
Yeah,
They have a
happy snow day tomorrow.
Happy snow day?
Yes.
Okay. No, they're excited.
I don't have to make it back.
No. Before we move to communications and reports, we're going to go with student reports. So, Charlotte, is there anything?
Yeah, so.
Just wait, Charlie, can you share with everybody your good news before you get started?
All right. So about an hour ago, I heard back from Smith College. I was accepted, and I was given the Holyoke Springfield Partnership Scholarship, which is the cost of tuition throughout all 4 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, so the Holyoke High Spirit Week was a success, bringing both campuses together for the pep rally. There was a brand new start to winter sports after 2 snow days, so there was a little kerfuffle at the beginning. And Holyoke High's theater company performed Clue on stage in 3 shows, setting a high bar for the spring musical.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So, moving on to communications and reports, and I pass it on over to Dr. Zurich.
Okay, we're going to try something a little different tonight. This is going to be a consultancy, and it's time, so we can't go over time, which is, I think, good news for everybody here. We are going to present, Mildred had asked us to look at discipline data, and we were going to share with you discipline data across the system, and looking at the different schools, looking at different subpopulations, and looking to see where there are pockets of inequities in our discipline data. And what we're asking you to do is to listen for the first. I'm going to time it here. I'm going to be the timer. The first 5 to 7 minutes. We have a presentation from Jenny Malavey and Sandy Dona. Jenny's our data strategist, and Sandy's our assistant chief of pupil services. And then you're going to have a chance to ask clarifying questions of them. And then I'm going to turn you loose for a discussion for about 7 to 10 minutes where none of us can interrupt, meaning the Holyoke Public School staff. It's among the school committee, Charlotte, of course, you're included, to have a conversation about the data. And what we're interested in learning is, what do you think some of the implications, what are the suggestions that you have for us from this data, which you already had in your packet. And then at the end, we're gonna reflect, meaning the HPS staff, and then the school committee cannot comment during the reflection. Okay? Has everybody got the rules of the game? Trying something new. We're trying to keep it fresh for the last meeting of 2019. Yes, do you have a question? Clarifying question already. Okay.
Clarifying questions. So, when you're talking about school committee discussion,
Yes.
so we're just gonna be like, hey, so what did you think about that? Like, oh my God.
No, one at a time.
Like, what are we doing?
You can moderate it if you'd like, but it means that the HPS staff is not going to comment, won't answer questions. It's just a discussion amongst yourself about what you think the implications of this data are and the direction and what our next steps should be as a school district based on the information that you see. Okay? So we're going to start. I've got the timer going.
Let's get it rolling.
And we're going to have Jenny and Sandy begin the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. So I'm going to start us out. We're specifically talking about out-of-school suspensions today.
So what we have on slide 2, our first slide, is a chart showing the breakdown of the count of students suspended versus the number of suspensions that we've had. We have a comparison from SY 13-14, which is right before receivership, which is a good baseline for us for what suspensions used to be. And then SY 18-19 here in orange, which is last year, and then green where we are right now. Just take note that the lighter bar on the bottom shows where we were in each year as of December 5th. This is to show you the actual current metrics, so you can see exactly where we were this year versus last year. And then that top bar is by the end of the year. So when we're looking at 808 on the top of the green bar, that's where we're projected to be by the end of the year. So just looking across this graph, you can see that our projected total of suspensions will be 808, which is about a little over 200 less than last year and significantly less than pre-receivership. Similarly, we are on track to suspend far fewer actual students. The next slide shows the breakdown of the total number of suspensions by the actual length that the suspension was. So, there we go. The top shows the breakdown of 10 plus days suspension, so those are fairly long. The bottom showing 1 to 2 day suspensions, which are our most common suspensions. So this shows our projection for the end of the year for this year so that it could be comparable across the 3 years. So overall, we're projected to end the year with about 300 fewer 1 to 2 day suspensions. We're a little bit higher with 3 to 5 day suspensions, projecting up about 35 from last year, but still significantly lower than pre-receivership. And then we're tracking a little bit higher for our longer suspension days. If there are questions about where we are right now as of December 5th compared to where we're projecting from the end of the year, I can answer that during the questions. We're moving fast, so I hope you bear with me. The next slide just shows us our demographic breakdown, comparing the percent of our out-of-school suspensions by subgroup. So this is showing our breakdown by ethnic subgroup. So if we look at the bars under Hispanic students, we can see that 89% of all of our suspensions are going to students who identify as Hispanic, and Hispanic students make up 81% of our suspensions. On the opposite end,
Of our population.
I'm sorry, what did I say? Oh, excuse me, our population. Thank you. Right now, Caucasian students represent 6% of our suspensions, but actually make up 14% of our district population. Slide 5 shows the same breakdown, but by different student subgroups. I think the biggest thing to note on this slide is the disparity for IEP students. 44% of our suspensions for the entire district are going to students who are on IEPs, while students on IEPs make up about a quarter of our population, 25%. I'm just trying to honor our 7 minutes, so if any of this spurs a question, please let me know. Okay, so slide 6 might be a little bit confusing because it seems to show the same as 2 slides ago. The difference here is that we are looking at the percent of suspension days. So instead of looking at the total number of suspensions, we're looking at the length of days. For example, you could have 1 suspension, but it could be for 10 days. The point of this is to show the number of days that students are missing learning. They're missing days of learning within school. So it kind of shows a breadth of an issue. So here you can see that Hispanic students are receiving 90% of the days suspensions, but are still 81% of the student population.
Can we ask a question now, or you want to?
No, wait till the
Oh, okay, she asked something, so, okay.
Is it something specific about interpreting the slide?
Oh, keep going.
Oh,
No,
okay,
the
I'm going.
clarifying questions come after.
I'm going. Okay, we're sticking to protocol.
What's way?
Sorry.
Let them rattle you, Jenny. Keep
Okay.
going.
Sorry. Slide 7 shows the days by these other vulnerable subgroups. You can see here that 49% of all of our suspension days are going to students in IEPs, and once again, just to reflect that that's 25% of our student population. You do see that males are receiving 66% of suspension days versus 53% of our population. This slide is meant to show the grade breakdown of the out-of-school suspensions by grade level. Generally across pre-K through 12, you would think that each grade has about 5 to 8% of our population, right? So we have grades 1 through 12 plus K and pre-K, so 14. But then the green bars show where the suspensions are landing. So you see big upticks in the green bars starting in 5th grade, kind of dropping, but staying pretty high going into 10th grade. So you can see that the majority of our suspensions are occurring with students between grades 5 and grade 10, and then they're getting lower in 11th and 12th grade again. And then the final slide shows the percent of out-of-school suspensions by school. In order to show you where there might be disparities in how many students there are in terms of our district population, and then the percent of suspensions that have happened thus far in the district. Holyoke High School North has 20% of the district's population, but they have 30% of the suspensions. Similarly, there's a bigger disparity at Donahue, where they make up 16% of our suspensions, but only 9% of our population.
Okay.
I'm ready for questions.
All right.
Oh, wow.
Did I do good with 7 minutes?
You did right on. You just made it.
You gave her extra time,
All right,
I
so
saw.
5 minutes for clarifying questions. These are just informational questions from the school committee.
Mr. Brunel.
I'll go rapid. Do you have a breakdown of what type of discipline that would warrant people to get a 1-day suspension compared to somebody's getting a 10-day, like for tardiness, things like that?
We have all that information, but it hasn't been collated in terms of the types of things that occurred that, like what would make somebody get 1 day versus more.
Also, and then have you done as to what we were suspending for in 2013, 2014 compared to what we're suspending for now? Because one of the feedbacks that I hear a lot from the teachers is that they're not suspending kids for what they used to suspend them for. So have we gone soft on that? That's why our numbers are down, to make it look good, or are we actually doing, are those in-house now that used to not be out of school suspensions?
Well, I think there's a few parts, but I don't know if we have the data on 13, 14 for suspensions. I don't know if we have what occurred. But in terms of why the numbers are down, we're hoping it's because school teams are now rethinking discipline, and we might be doing restorative justice instead of sending students out.
We also use in-house more than we ever did before, and the laws have changed around suspension since 13, 14.
And lastly, if I could, just last question is that you also have in here, the data is that obviously some of these students are multiple offenders, and although you have a breakdown with Hispanic population 81%, but 89%, is there a way for you to break that down to, if a child is Hispanic and he's he's done something 5 times, are you adding that in? So it's skewing the number higher than instead of it's just one individual. So I think that perhaps makes it more disparaging than it actually is.
So these graphs are meant to show you the total number of out-of-school suspensions overall. It's not meant to show you the total number of students generally. The reason that, okay, so what you're saying is that a person could offend 5 times. In these graphs, they would be counted 5 times because we're looking at total suspensions, but that is just one kid, right? So it could be a repeat offender. The reason that we wanted to look at that is that I think if you just look at the unique kids, you end up losing the breadth of the issue of suspensions, because we want to make sure that we're capturing, like for that one kid, if they're getting suspended 10 times, even if they're just 1 day suspensions every time, that's 10 days of learning that's lost. Now they're chronically absent. So by looking at the total number of suspensions overall, we can be kind of looking at that breadth of the issue of kids losing time out of school and how do we support kids to make sure their behavior is in line with effective teaching and classroom management, but also making sure they're getting the services in school that they need.
Right. Mr. Sheehan.
Yeah, I guess just 2 pieces of information I'd like to see. I think it's difficult and it's hard to understand the whole like pre-receivership, post-receivership, since it failed to mention like it's also post-chapter 222, so it dramatically changed.
Yep.
So I mean, that should really be in the presentation. It shouldn't just be this, look at all these great things during receivership of suspensions going down, the law changed. So I think that's a little misleading in this. But I'd also like to, I'd like to see the other years that are missing.
Sure.
And also the comparison to regular attendance. So what percentage are suspensions playing with normal absences from school? When you look at absences from school, how much suspensions are impacting those number of absences in comparison to other reasons for being out?
I do think that that is something that the Attendance Coalition does look at. I mean, in-house suspension doesn't count as a day lost from school, which is why we push for in-school suspensions, but every day out of school counts as an absence.
Right, I just want to see like
Yeah.
the breakdown of why students are out of school.
Absolutely.
Mr. Burks.
I think there is a lot of information missing for us to have a serious conversation about suspensions in the schools, especially when we're talking about the laws and especially when we're talking about children on IEPs and how they're handled, and talking about pre-receivership and the demographic breakdown too. There was nothing in their pre-receivership about demographic breakdown either. I think a good point was brought up about the infractions. Do people know exactly what you get a detention for, exactly what you get suspended for, exactly what you might get something else for, so that there's no picking and choosing who gets a detention and who gets suspended for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, or whatever. So I think there's a lot of information missing from this presentation. I don't think that we could have a serious discussion about suspension without that information being present.
I can tell you that we do gather the disciplinary codes for suspensions in our student information system, but we only started that information system in 15-16. So prior to that, I don't know that we have that same information in our old management system. What I can tell you about what I know about School Brains, where we keep this information, is that we have a number of infraction codes that a teacher, assistant principal, when they're putting disciplinary actions into School Brains, can choose from. I think one of the issues is that sometimes I feel like they're a little vague. What I might find disrespectful might be what somebody else finds like aggressive, like so I don't think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is some interpretation on the school level on like what each of those codes mean. And then also for suspensions, people choose multiple infractions. Say a fight happens, and that's the reason for suspension, but there was also like swearing and something else inappropriate in the middle, they might check all of those disciplinary codes. So even within the data, it's a little hard to disaggregate, like what's the one thing that got them suspended? Like maybe if they were just swearing at each other, you might not have suspended, but because there was a fight between two students, that's where the suspension occurred. So I think there's some room there for improving like the clarity on how we collect that data.
All right, I'm gonna move to a conversation, and you can bring up things that are missing. I do want to point out that the purpose is not meant to show differences between pre-receivership and now. It really is to help us think about what the data is. That's what the data you have in front of you, and please suggest what other information you want. But it's to look at what are some of the concerns and patterns that, and what are the should be the implications for our work based on what you see here. In this data. So I would just ask that folks have a conversation about it, and if there are things that you think need to be provided that are missing, please share that in the conversation.
All right, I know Mr. Christian was next.
So, my students went through the high school during the transition, and just because we have the years, I know it's not about pre-receivership, post-receivership. There was, before the receiver came to town, there was a year of let's get our numbers down so we don't have a receiver. Okay, so I've lived through all that, and one of the most distressing meetings I was ever at was at the high school. I'm sorry if this is a repeat because I feel like I've said this before, where magically the numbers went down without a dollar more put toward addressing these discipline issues, without a single person more, without an hour more of in-house suspension available. All of the infractions went down 50%. And my kids told me why. And teachers told me why. It's because teachers stopped sending kids out of the class. They were told not to send kids out of the class. And all of a sudden the thresholds for every step of discipline were reduced, because without the suspension, ultimately, everything in between didn't mean anything. I'm not going to show up to detention. What's going to happen? So teachers stopped giving detentions, and I'm not sure if our local student has any kind of feeling about that kind of a thing, because I don't have kids in the schools anymore to hear about it. But I'd like to see the number of in-house suspensions next to these graphs, so I could see. I'm all for changing our paradigm to fit the law. We have to. And also to address this huge high number of suspensions we were seeing. And I know we've done things, especially in 11th and 12th grade, and we can see that in the numbers. We see those students have all kinds of alternative programming that we've made available. So I would expect their numbers to be down. But I am very concerned about what's happening in the 9th and 10th grade levels. And I'm very concerned about and I'm excited about the funding that we have coming and grant money that we have coming, so we can bring personnel to bring students out of a classroom that's being disrupted and putting them into an in-house or 1-on-5, 1-on-3 situation. And I'm excited we're going to have that, but that's kind of my, that's what I like to discuss is, what are we doing in-house? What resources do we have? What are those numbers? And how does that fit in this graph?
So we're not going to get any responses back from them. It's just us basically having a conversation for, now we have how long left? Maybe 6 minutes?
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Brunette, do you have anything to share that amongst us?
I guess one of the biggest things that I've been concerned about is the disparity between Holyoke High School North Campus and Dean. Because if you look at the percent of out-of-school suspensions, it's 20 versus 150%. And if we're going to be, one school, two campuses, I don't really know how there could be this much of a disparity. It's population-based. There's 1,300 versus less than 1,000. But still, I don't think that such population numbers would constitute 150% versus 20%.
Okay. Mr. Brunel?
Yeah, looking at the numbers, that's one of the things I was looking at. But if you look historically, years ago when we had the same at the high school before, when we had that information provided us 5-6 years ago, whatever it was, the ninth graders is the difference. You don't have ninth graders anymore at the Dean. And that is one of the bigger, I mean,
That would have
This
fell under
year?
clarifying.
well, that's been a problem though in the past, has been the 9th and 10th grade going in that transition. If you look at the difference between the kids going, the number of 9th graders going in, that's been a huge issue at the schools. That's something I think we recognize, but we've never been able to really correct, I would say, so it's a matter, I think, of getting to the 8th graders and obviously looking at our charts, getting to the 5th and 6th graders. And that's a transition period, obviously, but the 9th grade, it always seemed to spike.
Mr. Collmore.
Yeah, time of incident from when a student first started getting into problems and the time of suspensions. How long a period is that?
So, Mr. Collmore, they can't answer to us
No, I
right
know
now.
that,
So
but-
you want me to write that question down? Like, what's the length of
Yeah.
time?
And
What's the length of time for what?
the length of time between the incident and the time they're suspended. Does the student have a chance to talk to someone, a teacher or counselor or something, before he or she is suspended?
Okay. All right. I wrote that down. So that's another. Is there anything else, Mr. Collmore, that you
No,
wanted
thank
to
you.
add? Nope, that one. Mayor Morse.
Great. Thanks, Mildred. Thank you both. I agree with some of my fellow committee members. I'd love to see more data on the specific types of infractions, but overall, I want to thank the administration for putting together more data for us to look at and just provide some context that, we were cited by the Department of Justice for having one of the highest out-of-school suspension rates for students of color in the entire country. And so oftentimes in the community, we hear this false narrative that, when I was in high school, no one was walking down the hallways and now they're, so laissez-faire, they let students do whatever they need. And when you look at this, and that's just not true. And when you look at the spikes here in the data, we have a lot of, it's going to go down the longer someone's been in high school because we're basically, over the years, we've pushed kids out that we identify and call problems, when the problem is we're not actually providing the high school experience necessary for young people to actually want to go to school. And so, people celebrate, what it once was. Well, what it once was brown and black kids getting sent out of school for infractions that white kids weren't getting sent out of school for. And so I've been really proud of the work of the restorative justice program in the schools for tackling the school to prison pipeline head on. And I think they're directly responsible for some of this data and trends that are heading in the right direction. There's still too much of a disparity, I think, in the schools, and we need to continue, providing resources necessary to support the expansion of those programs, to have conversations between teachers and students. What's happening in your personal life that would make you a better student by addressing that? But the goal to send kids out of school doesn't do anything for the kid, and it doesn't do anything for the teacher. It doesn't restore or transform a relationship, and it directly leads to kids feeling like they're not welcome at school in the first place. And so I think, even related to other parts of our agenda around the over $300,000 grant we're getting to diversify our teachers and faculty, is directly related to students feeling like they're going to a culturally competent place of learning as well. So all of our efforts, I think, are interrelated. And while I think that there's a lot of questions about, what data isn't here, I think we all should be proud of the fact that we've, number one, implemented the law the way it should be implemented, but also have an eye and an intense focus on equity and inclusion. Are there going to be students that need to be suspended? Are there going to be students that need to go to in-house? Absolutely. But I think we need to look at, are we treating students differently based on what they look like or what language they speak or where they come from compared to other students? It certainly was the case when I was in school. But what's the case now that wasn't when I was in high school is that there's a really strong group of students that aren't letting adults in the school continue those disparities. And so thanks again for showing this data, and looking forward to continuing to see this progress.
Mr. Sheehan.
I want to recommend, and I know I'm not going to talk about school brains, even though it was brought up, but I just think that maybe greater training in calibration for what's being selected as drop downs for infractions, because I think it is really, really hard, because it is really subjective of what one person thinks is insubordinate, could be disrespectful, could be this, could be that, and that serves nobody. That's not helpful at all. So just some greater alignment and calibration around professional development in August or whenever it may be, just so there's kind of some norm setting amongst staff. I mean, it's going to be hard because it's going to have to be the senior leadership team, the principals and stuff, kind of setting the norms of what they believe it is, and then setting it down to their buildings. So there's calibration throughout all buildings of what insubordinate means, of what disrespectful means. So there's not different standards of that depending on what school you're at. So students know when they move up to different schools that at least the same level of, I think, would be important for everyone involved. And it's going to be a long time to make it across the board, but I think it would be helpful.
Mr. Bergner? Okay. So for me, I didn't get a chance to ask for a clarifying question, so I'll talk amongst here. Hopefully they're hearing it, and we'll be able to address it then. I just, in regards to the suspensions, I'm wondering if they're also including those for students that are called, that the families are being called to pick up the student and bring them home because they're just not having a good day. That is also considered a suspension in the eyes of DESE. So is that also being included in this? And then I also wanted to look at, we know we had Veritas here today, but they make up 4% of the population, but yet their out of school suspension is 13%. So are they going based on their own infractions and how they interpret it, or are they going along with the Holyoke Public Schools policies on infractions? Anybody else have anything else before I heard that darn chime go off already. Oh, alrighty. Your turn, HPS.
All right. So a couple things. I in reflecting on this, I think Devin makes a good point. I want to take a picture of what you wrote down because there's some good suggestions of the school committee. I think the consistency around the infractions, we can certainly provide you with data on the types of infractions. I'm not sure how helpful that would be now because it's really is subjective, but it's available and we can provide that to people. And we spent a lot of time looking at it at the high school level, and we've discussed it as a leadership team. There are infractions that we have a lot of questions about when a child gets suspended. Clearly, if there's a violent or aggressive or dangerous situation, we do suspend kids for that. But there's a lot of gray area in between, and there are still high levels at, as you said, Charlotte, at the Holyoke High North Campus. I am particularly concerned about the students with IEPs in this data. And to Mildred's point, two things. One, the gap is most significant for students with IEPs. Many of those students have in their IEPs social and emotional goals. And the fact that we would be suspending those children is of significant concern. And to me, when I saw this data for the first time, was the first thing that jumped out of the page is we have work to do in our schools because we have many students who are on IEPs for just being able to regulate their emotions. And my guess is they're being suspended for something that is part of their goals and their development as a student. So that's something we need to dive deeper in. The issue around parents calling, home.
Really quick to clarify.
Sure, clarify
the
for me.
School calling the parents
that's
to
what
come
I mean.
pick up.
The
Okay.
school, calling. I have to say, since Sandy's been here, she's been anytime we learn of a situation like that, and parents are getting better at it. I think some of the work is the CPAC. I see Ms. Burks here, informing parents about what their rights are, that school can't call and say, pick up your child without documentation of any kind. Anytime we do receive calls like that, we are very quick to make sure that the school does follow the proper documentation, but we do need parents to continue to voice when that happens. Sandy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that reflection, or Jenny.
No, just the students with IEPs
Right.
is concern by far that we're seeing.
Hold on a second. Yeah, I think, and I think that's the work we want to do with our schools. There are inequities that appear in the data. We're not going to be able to tackle all of them. I think for us as a system, the first place we're going to go is with students with IEPs, and it's glaring at the high school level. But I think it's even because this is the whole system. It's even more pronounced when you take the entire system. Many of the children who are being suspended at the younger grades are students with who have IEPs. I think it's also important to note. I think it's interesting that we have the highest rates in 5th, 6th, 7th grade. It's part of the conversation we've had about the middle school experience. I'm not suggesting that the high school experience it does need to be more engaging, but as you've heard me say, I'm particularly concerned about our middle schools. I mean, obviously, one of the reasons we had a middle school building proposal. Clearly, there are the fact that the rates are so high says something, in my opinion, right now about the experience kids are getting 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and speaks to why I think we need to continue to move to a middle school model that creates unique experiences for children at that age group. I had the chance to be here Friday night when STEM had their music concert to see it was a middle school music concert, very different than what our elementary music concerts look like. That's the kinds of things we have to do more of. And this place was packed with families, packed. More than you would. That Friday night during the holiday season, there wasn't an empty seat in the Dean cafeteria. And it was the kids had generated their own music. Certainly wasn't holiday music, but it's music that meant that connected with them and culturally relevant to them. That is the type of experience that's going to, I think, reduce the number of suspensions. STEM already this year has seen a major decline in suspensions because of some of the work that Mr. Kanata and his team have done to create a more engaging community for kids. Anything else that you want to add? Okay. I'm going to stop there. I guess I'll take a few. If there are questions, Niles, did you have a question?
Well, one of the things that when you're looking at children with IEPs, that John brought up a good point. If you have that student has had multiple suspensions, that's one student. As far as when you're looking at population, versus number of suspensions, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
We're missing that.
Right.
So you could have a kid on an IEP get suspended 5 times, and now they're skewing the scale dramatically. So it might not be as big a problem as it might be a small number of students that are skewing the scale.
We can obviously we have the access to that information about the number of students with IEPs who have already been suspended.
Yeah, we can definitely get you the actual number breakdown of the unique students versus the total amount of suspensions. I think what you'll still find is there's a disparity there.
And then, but I am the other thing I was going to mention, Dr. Zreich, was I think I forgot the announcement about that the grant that was coming up. I think you had mentioned some schools were going to be looking at different programming, and does that correlate with the schools that we see here needing? Okay.
Well, that model that we presented last month, the Bright model, that's only for K to 4, and so the schools though with the highest suspension rates, Kelly's one of them, Morgan, Lawrence, and no, it's for K to 4, so Veritas doesn't serve. And Sullivan was the other. Those are some of where we see the highest rates at the elementary school level.
But Donahue,
Donahue goes up to 8th grade though, so I would bet that you would see more at the middle school level there.
Right.
Okay.
That's the other thing. It's hard to sometimes compare. The schools that have middle school tend to have higher rates, but it does again speak to the needs that we have in middle school.
You could break down those.
Yes. Yep. Donahue would be the next school that we would want to introduce the Bright program in. So,
Just really quickly, how proactive are we working with the families that have children on IEPs to hold a determination of manifestation meeting?
So we have to by law. If we find out that what we've told our ETLs in all the schools is once a student has 8, to hold a manifestation then, even before the 10, because we want to be proactive working with families so that we can then provide, change some goals, do whatever we can to help support the student. If parents call central office and say that they haven't had a manifestation, I'm not aware of any meetings that haven't occurred.
The reason why I'm asking is I know in the past, it's not something that we're proactive on. It's either the family comes and is like, my kid's already been suspended 15 times for 15 days, and all of a sudden is, because a lot of families don't know that they have a right
Right.
to request that meeting. So that's why I'm just saying, how proactive are we? I think it's like turning the table, us being more proactive and really looking at the needs of the child, which it should have never gotten to that if we would have been addressing that IEP a whole lot quicker when we started to see the changes.
Right. So that's what I think the ETLs now, in their training this year, they've already had training on manifestation. And that's what our new stance is, to have the meeting earlier, than waiting till 10. So I feel pretty confident that we're all on board on this. I don't think there's any instances where it's not happening.
Yeah, and even before a hearing, I mean, there's got to be conversations about whether the services are right for a child who
Right.
has been suspended multiple times, even if it's for one day, but if it's 4 times for one day, we ought to be looking at whether the services are appropriate for that child who's on an IEP.
Well, thank you so much. I think this here, even though it was kind of good the way it was, it is kind of confusing because it's weird, right? Where we're going to ask a clarifying question, but actually we're asking you a long question of what we want to see, waiting for you to respond, and it kind of took up all the time. But it was good conversation, but I think it's something where, because we're missing so many other pieces and we have more things that we want to see, it's something that would be like a lengthier thing where
Sure.
I think spending a whole day together with you at a retreat.
We could do that. We could do that, and we could. And if you would like, if you could send to Mildred or myself a list of the data points you want to see, we'll pull any years, whatever. The only year that's a blip, and that's why we didn't share it, is that 14-15 year, which is. This is not about pre-receivership, post-receivership, but in that 14-15 school year, the data dropped from 20% suspension rate to a 5% suspension rate. I don't think it's an accurate depiction of the system. I think what's more accurate is to look at 13, 14, and then every year, skip 14, 15, and then look at every other year, because I think does give you a better picture. But any data you want us to provide, I think a retreat, if this is the topic the school committee wants to dive into, we can make that the topic. But that's something you'd have to share with Mildred.
Mr. Kershane.
I want to say is, I think it's really, really important. I'm really concerned about the high school. I'm concerned about I feel like sometimes we're doing programming where we're getting a lot more people to come into the district, people who have traditionally choiced out of the district coming into the district, and then all of a sudden on the other end where we used to, I remember one of the first things that you said to me was the Holyoke School District is a strange district. So many people choice back in for the high school, and I think that trend has changed over the last 6 years. I think people are doing the opposite now. I think suddenly we have gone where we have people choicing in to the grade schools and now choicing out of the high school level over this issue. This is the issue. And I really would love to have a full day retreat myself.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. So moving along.
Okay, so we have a brief presentation on translation and interpretation. We just want to update you on our efforts. I've asked our lead interpreter, Nick Magnolia, to join us and introduce who he has with him, and then just quickly go over the work we've done with translation and interpretation. Turn on your mic there, Nick.
All right, very brief presentation on the state of translation and interpretation in Holyoke. This picture here in the main presentation, that is all of the people who got their certificates this year. That is the second cohort. What we're doing, well, so far we have trained 51 different staff members. That was last year and this year, and it's a 24-hour training presented by professors and licensed trainers from UMass who were working with the UMass Translation Center, who delivered this workshop to us to Holyoke Public Schools, and the training is ongoing. We're offering one for 2020 as well. So mostly this is about testimonials, what people are saying about it, what they like about it. Just to start off, one of the quotes that we got out of the feedback was that, we've learned so much what kind of impact we have on our parents' lives, and how we have to learn how to place our personal feelings aside in order to be professional and effective. What they're talking about is a big part of our training was about impartiality, learning how to separate yourself and be a neutral party to aid in conversation and communication, but not necessarily advocate for the parent. Advice for future trainees. It's important to be confident while you interpret. It's okay to stop and ask questions. That's a huge part about being an interpreter, clarifying questions. The interpreter needs to know what this term means in order to put it into the other language. Try to keep yourself grounded in the moment. And then the picture that we're seeing here is everybody doing their power pose. Important to walk into an encounter feeling confident. Oh, let's see. There's another testimonial that was from the other translator interpreter, but actually now at this point I want to hand it over to Marilyn. Marilyn is a district and translator interpreter. We're doing this full time and translating most of the time, but she did attend the workshop for the first time this year, and I want to give her a chance to talk about her experience.
Hola, buenas noches. Hello, good evening. My name is Marilyn, and as Nick says, I'm a translator on central office. My experience in the training was wonderful. It was a very good chance, to meet with another staff members from another schools to see how is their challenges, what they do every single day, what they have on their school when they are trying to do their dual role of interpret and do whatever they do as a daily basis, like if they're counselors or they're paraprofessionals or that kind of positions at schools. So one of my better memories that I have over there is one of the last workshops that we were working in small groups, and we were using the interpreting headsets to do simultaneously, to interpret simultaneously. And that was, I think, almost no one on the room had that experience before. That was amazing. That was amazing and scary at the same time, because that's when you realize it's not as easy as you think. No second language or know how to talk, that doesn't mean that you can be a good interpreter or a good translator. It's more than that. So for me, I think it's very important to have this kind of trainings, because then you can have a certain amount of people ready at schools to help parents, to help to have better communication between parents and schools. That for me is very crucial in any educational system. I think that just try to close that gap, that language gap, that throw that barriers, that parents can feel able to express themselves, that parents can feel able to know every detail or information about their children. For me, that's very important, and I think this type of training help the staff to be professional, to do because we learn about code of ethics, we learn about roles. Like Nick says, when you cannot be an advocate, you just need to interpret or translate, just that. And I think to have a professional staff doing that in every school is very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. So just moving on for our plans for the future. We are offering professional development for translation and interpretation, as well as professional development to administrators for how to utilize this tier model in their schools and use their trained staff in the right way. You know, coming to the full timers for some of this more serious stuff, while going to people in their schools for parent-teacher conferences that aren't so high stakes. We are going to be doing some training for students. That's one of our plans on the horizon. It's very exciting. We know that some other school districts are doing initiatives like this. It's essentially a professional training for them, and maybe the school can benefit getting some flyers and things like that out there, getting them practice for the professional opportunities in the future. And another plan is the Educational Translator and Interpreter Conference. There's one like this on the West Coast, and we're thinking, why not bring it to East Coast? A lot of people throughout the state do this kind of thing, this kind of work that we're doing here, providing translation and interpretation to schools. It's a huge field. It involves community, legal, medical. It's all wrapped up in one. Sometimes it's easy to make it seem like it's simpler because it's a combination, but in fact, I think it's the opposite. Professional development will be for interpreting and translating as separate skills. You know, the original workshop was to introduce both skills, and then now we're trying to go in depth onto each one, interpreting being oral and translation being written. Most important for interpreters is to have a standard of practice and a code of ethics. When you walk into a room, you need to know what your rules are and what your boundaries are. Translation is a little bit different. Translation is written. You have plenty of time to do it. You can really think about, you can drive yourself nuts over one word. So we really want to be able to give them time to explore both of these areas. Some of these people who are trained to do both end up just translating for the most part if they're office clerks, yet a paraprofessional might be running around interpreting all the time, never really translating a document. So this is a really great chance to give them in-depth knowledge in both areas. And of course, this goes along with our strategic priorities. In the beginning, it was very family engagement, but now we're shifting into that professional culture area where we are now training the staff and as well as administrators, getting everybody on board to what language access is and how to deliver it.
Awesome. Anybody, Mr. Sheehan?
I just want to take a moment and thank both of you. I know whenever we have community meetings, we had so many information sessions that the district had about the school building project. I know that either one or both of you would show up at many of those meetings, set up, ready to go, wait, 15, 20 minutes to see if anyone needed any support, and then you didn't need to, you could go home. But I just want to thank you for doing what you do outside of those normal hours and for supporting the committee with all of that.
Happy to serve.
And I just have one thing. I'm not sure, like on TV, right? Our meetings, you stop. Our meetings are done in English, but is there like subtitling for specific languages? So how do we engage our community in respects to being a part of hearing about the school committee meetings, learning of what we're talking about? If we really can't have that conversation or that communication because of language barrier, or even those for ASL, right? So that's just food for thought. Thank you so much.
Can I? Yeah, I think that's a great point. Somebody go ahead. No. You done? No, I just want to thank. I do want to thank Nick, who's really transformed our translation and interpretation efforts as a district. We still have a long way to go, but schools now have a place they can go and request documents to be translated, and they have they can request to have an interpreter at a meeting. If they have a school-wide meeting and they don't have anybody that can do it, not only do they have now staff that have been trained, they can request centrally support for that. We also, for the first time, now have a database where we track all IEPs, and we track to make sure that once they're requested, that they're translated in a timely fashion. The history has been very poor around the length of time that it took for an IEP to be complete, to be submitted for translation. Sometimes parents never received it. All to Nick's credit, he's created a system where we can monitor and see how long it's taking. And if we don't have enough manpower or women power within the district, we end up sending it out to a consultant to do it for us. And Nick, I don't know how many IEPs did we, or special ed documents did we translate last year? Do you have the
820 something.
right? Which was up by 500 from the year before, which suggests all that suggests is we weren't doing our job in translating documents for families. And so Nick has really built a system that, at any moment, we know whether we have a backlog and how many we've done, how much translation we've done. We'll also point out that at the state there is a bill at the bill at the legislature to look at school-based translation and interpretation, and they asked for a commission to be established, which the professor who was here, did she leave, Nick?
Yes.
Okay, Regina was here from UMass. They're our partner in this. She was part of the task force. And the work that we're doing in Holyoke is what's driving some of what we think are going to be the recommendations for all school districts. School districts don't have, at this point, any responsibilities or expectations around translation and interpretation. It really depends. There is expectations around IEPs, but there is no expectations around training of people that do it. We have a system where we're training folks, and we believe that some of the work we've done is what's going to drive the guidance and the expectations for school districts. It is costly, and we've put a lot of resources into our department, which is, again, it will be an unfunded mandate, but in our case, it's necessary. And I think Nick can tell you, not only do we have many Spanish-speaking families here, the number of families are growing that speak other languages in Holyoke. Nick, I know we have Arabic families. We have what other?
At one point,
Romanian,
Arabic, Swahili, Chinese. Those are always present. Kurundi is one of them, which is really hard to access. So you really need to have a good pool of people to work with when you need to contact those parents, especially when they have more than one kid in different schools. Right? You think about it as being just this one family, and then you discover that, they have one kid in each school. Got it. Okay. Plenty of need, plenty of demand.
And all those requests now go through Nick and his office. And so thank you for the work you've done.
Absolutely. And I did want to just mention, Mildred, what you were mentioning about Spanish and then ASL as well. It just made me think that, we do have a presentation coming up at McMahon School Ian White School. And at that presentation, we are going to have Spanish interpretation available as well as ASL interpretation, because we know we have more than one LEP parent in that school who is deaf, so they're going to need an ASL interpreter. So it's really nice to know that not only having Spanish there, but we're going to have two interpreters at the same time, which always makes it more fun.
Nick, can you just talk a moment about that video that's coming out for parents around guidance for translation and interpretation?
Yeah, there's going to be a video that's going to be posted on the homepage under translation interpretation. There is a page that's directed towards families specifically, and it's available in each one of their languages. And we haven't left it up to Google Translate to translate these pages, especially not for Swahili. Chinese, maybe, but not Swahili. So we did it all. And so parents who speak those languages can access that homepage directly translated by a professional translator, and the video will be available in those languages as well. And they'll be able to listen to what our priorities are as a district and how we value translation and interpretation, and talk a little about these training workshops, letting parents know that we are invested in providing language access, and we're also invested in our people, our staff, to be able to provide that as well.
And how they can request at a meeting.
And there will be information absolutely about there's information about how they need to go into their school if they receive anything extra. Obviously we're translating essential documents and we're translating them all, but anything else that slips through that they didn't get, they know that the point is to get them to know that they can come into the school and get it translated.
Excellent. Mr. Brunel?
Yeah, just a quick point and the work you guys do and that we need, but I just want to point out, like, one of the first things Dr. Reich, when he came, was a point that was the school system phone number and information was not in Spanish at all. I think that was the first thing. Can you believe that there was no way for people
press 2 for English?
Right, nothing for that. And he changed that right away. So I know his commitment to making sure that serving the community, but that was like the first thing that no one in those years ever picked up on it, and he did right away. So I just want to, that's a small example. That was like the first thing he ever did, I think.
And I can say I'm grateful to the fact that those things are noted and addressed. Absolutely.
Yeah. I will say we do get critique, and rightfully so, about the quality of our translation sometimes when our team doesn't do that. And we need to continue to work on that, because we do get feedback that there are grammatical errors and there are issues in our Spanish at times when they are put out by schools. And that is something we need to get better at, as the quality control of the documents that go out. I'm not so concerned about our IEPs because they're quality control, but other documents that go out. I think we've heard from folks who have told us that our Spanish could be better. And that is sort of the next level of work, is how do we have a better way of controlling for quality.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely part of what a translator does. Peer revision, you proofread your work, you check it, you fix it. Besides, there's really interesting things happening with the language in Holyoke. I mean, the language is different, really. So when we're doing this translation, we're doing a localization when it comes down to it. We're making something that's going to be available and accessible, even if it doesn't have to be perfect Spanish. It has to be understandable, and that's really what we're going for. You can say wawa, just has to be in the right context. No problem.
And Ileana still lives within the Holyoke Public Schools.
That's right.
That's who you hear every time you call that number, is Ileana Cintron.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Any further questions? I thank you guys for all that you're doing. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Superintendent correspondence.
Yeah, in your folder, you just have a list of notes from me, so you can take a look at that. One thing I would point out today is that our new chief of social emotional and behavioral learning started today, Mario Flores. And in the folder I gave you, his bio is there. I will ask him to come to the next meeting so you can meet him. But today was his first day. And it delineates what his job responsibilities will be. We've been looking for somebody for that role for over a year now. And it's a critical role as we talk about the mental health supports, addressing some of the things that we talked about, the needs of our kids that lead to suspensions, out-of-school suspensions. Ian White does have an event on Wednesday night about gun safety in response to what had occurred at the school last week. We've been working with Moms Demand Action, and they are coming to meet with families. Ms. Glasheen organized them to attend, and they're also working on speaking to classrooms about appropriateness around the use of weapons. And that was in response to a lot of feedback we received from parents over the last week. And so Wednesday night is that event at Ian White. I do want to point out that we do have a snow day tomorrow. And as Chicopee and Springfield were quick to call, we followed suit. There will be no school tomorrow, and we're still making a decision on whether our offices will be open. There are a series of events this week. There's a concert that was supposed to be scheduled for tomorrow that will have to be moved. And Wednesday night there's a high school concert, a winter concert, and I'd encourage you to attend. I do want to call out that the Clue show was a terrific event on this weekend. I was really impressed, and it's nice that we have now another theatrical performance, strong performance in the fall, not just the spring, to complement the fine work that Mark Todd and his students do annually. I want to thank Bevan Brunel for her leadership there. And just looking at the notes, anything else I want to highlight? The MSBA letter, I'm trying to schedule a conversation with the MSBA, hopefully either Wednesday or Thursday, to discuss what expedited process really means for Holyoke. My note, you saw the letter that was submitted, signed by Devin, Sheehan, and other members of the community. And I did attend the meeting where we were voted out of the process. And in the meeting, they reiterated again that Holyoke will be allowed to engage in what they're calling an expedited process. It's still not clear to me what that means. And that's what I'm hoping to get more clarity on. I will point out that the commissioner's representative did vote against Holyoke being pulled out of the pipeline. But however, every other board member voted in favor of pulling Holyoke out of the pipeline. But again, I'm hopeful that this expedited process means that we can apply in January for an SOI, a statement of interest, and that there'll be a faster path towards us getting back into the queue to examine the building of at least one school on a similar timeline that we had hoped previously. To stop there, I do want to wish everybody a happy holidays and note that our offices will be closed on Christmas Eve, but other than that, we will be open during the holidays. Well, other than Christmas and New Year's Eve, we'll be closed on Christmas and New Year's Eve, and we close on Christmas Eve. And our schools.
Wait.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What
I'm
about
speaking too
day?
fast.
So the 24th.
I'm gonna be absolute. Let me be clear again. We close the 24th, Christmas Eve. We close Christmas Day, and we close New Year's Day. Those 3 days will be closed. The last day of school is on the 20th, and we will be off until January 2nd.
All righty. Wow, that was a lot of info. So moving on. Approve of the joint city council school committee meeting minutes to accept or
To accept.
move to. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, new business? Old business?
Say one thing. This
Mr.
with the
Shan?
school building project, depending on what this maybe modified process looks like for the statement of interest, it will still go through the process of needing some sort of dialogue here in this group and with the city council. So this is not something that can just be done when it opens up on January. So it's from January to April you have for submission. So that's all I'll say.
Okay. Organizational meeting is January 7th. We will be, those that are going to be sworn in, it'll be January 6th at 10 a.m. at City Hall. If you cannot make it to the swearing in, please make sure you get in touch with Miss Brenna McGee. And any other announcements? Mr. Burks.
Just before we go, and I'll make it quick too. I just want to thank you all again for everything that you do. You're all incredibly hardworking advocates for the school. It's been a pleasure to sit on the committee with all of you. I think it's a good relationship that we have, even the receivership, whatever people might say about it. It's been a good relationship between the school committee and receivers. So Dr. Strike, I want to thank you for keeping people together and working hard and listening to people and listening to the community as well. And I want to congratulate, and I want to thank Devin for everything you did, especially around the middle schools and all the hard work you did. I want to thank Aaron Vega too. When we were coming over here in the car, I will be quick, I promise. Riding with my wife, she said, "Are you sad that this is your last meeting?" And I said, "No." And I'm not sad. The reason why is because I know how hard you all work and what you do for the students. And I think that they're still in good hands. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Aaron Vega for all the work that he did with getting more funding into the district. I want to congratulate also Jay Wellahan, who will be here also, and I want to congratulate my wife, Rebecca Burks, who will be sitting in this seat. This seat will be well served, and she's done a lot already for the schools. You know, and our 3 children, they went through the school district. It's been a very positive relationship, and part of that is because of the fight that we've had. You know, it hasn't all been great, but for the most part, the whole thing has been very positive. 2 of them have graduated. 1 of them is graduating this year. And I want to thank the students and the teachers again. Without their students support each other more than you know. I mean, they are incredible people in our schools. The teachers as well, and supporting. And as we work towards getting more social emotional help for students, we have a lot of teachers who understand those needs and who are doing a great deal in the classrooms to help those students who need them in schools and as well as out of schools. There are a lot of staff that goes above and beyond to make sure a lot of our students have what they have. So I just wanted to say that again. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for being who you are. And although I'm not sad, I'll miss it a little bit, but it's been good. It's been a good ride. So thank you.
Thank you again to the both of you. So, like Warner Brothers says, that's all, folks. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Anybody? All those in favor? All those opposed? Nobody? Meeting adjourned at 7:40.